Put it up already.
You know, I don't have access to anything.
You have access to everything.
I signed up. I put in my email address and it did the thing. Since last time I signed up, I sent your Facebook that the same problem.
Yeah.
Communications and all that.
Okay.
Yeah, how do we back up?
All right. Let me put up the first page real quick. That it was denied at the time. Yeah. It's. I know. I know. It's a known issue, challenge, whatever. And my hope is that yeah. So here. What?
Right now I'm in a job, so I'm over here.
Okay. All right. That's my mistake. I went over this at the beginning of the last session before the break, but I'll go over it again. So for simplicity, there are 3 links that you should be aware of here. The top one is the link to the wiki, which anyone can get to, whether they're signed up or not. The next one is the Etherpad. That's the notes for this particular session. And actually, I need someone to take those notes. I need a volunteer. Someone to just, as we go through it, take down important points, if there are any action items or questions that anyone is going to get back to or anything along those lines. So please, somebody. I can't do it.
My laptop in this room.
No, you can't do it. You're operating.
I know.
Somebody. It's not that hard. All you gotta do is type. Come on. All right, that's valid. It's hard to do on the phone. You gonna do it? Oh, okay. I thought you were raising your hand. Yeah, I'll do it. Oh, all right. Somebody. Thanks for joining.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, fine. I'll try and take them down. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get them all, but I'll do my best. So, yeah, the Etherpad. Oh, and one thing you should do, and this will work on mobile, tablet, whatever, even if you're not taking the notes, go to the Etherpad link, and please put your name down as having attended, right? Because it helps us, not me, I don't do it, but it helps attribute time contributed to the project, for your particular business or whatever. So please, just within the Etherpad, put yourself down as a contributor at the top. You'll see other names there when you connect, so just do that. And then the final one is a mailing list. And so this is important because even if you think you're signed up for the mailing list, you may not be signed up for the mailing list. And we realized this a while ago. This is part of the reason why people are out there wondering what the heck is going on. We're not seeing any emails, blah, blah, blah. All that came from the fact that we moved from data center design to data center. And you might think that, oh, just take the list that was on the other one, move it over to the other one. I agree, that's how it should work, but it doesn't. Because we use Mailman and privacy is a feature of Mailman, even as administrators, we can't get in and see who the recipients are. So it's not as easy as migrating the user list over. So please sign up for the mailing list. That is how all the communication goes out. That's the main method of communication. I'm sorry for the confusion there, but pardon me? There's no sign up. It's just there. Yeah, you just have to type your name. You don't have to sign in. You don't have to sign in, sign up, nothing like that. It's just an open notes platform. Okay. So that's why you weren't getting emails, Bruce.
I was getting emails from him.
Yeah, but not the data center design, because anyway. Is Amber Alert? Nope. I'm good? All right.
So what is it?
It's the notes. It's the notes for this session. Well, Etherpad in general is what we use for notes. So all of the monthly calls are using the same Etherpad, so you can go back and see what the notes were. It's a different one. The link to the monthly call Etherpad is on the wiki page. And actually, you can get to other places just by going to the wiki. That's why I put it at the top. I put everything on the wiki that is pertinent that we need to know. All right, are we good on this? Any additional trouble or questions from anyone? It's pretty clear. Still working on the link over there, sir? You're good? Okay, I can. Does anyone need me to leave this up? I want to move back over to the framework. There we go. Okay. So again, I realize this is quite difficult to read from back there. There really isn't any better way of showing this. Even if I were to make it one page, I would then have to scroll. It's easier to do this. But anyhow, the introduction is more or less what I already said. It's a way for organizations to evaluate their operations based on business objectives, figure out where they are, where they want to be on the scale, and then develop a plan for improvement or continued operation. Yeah, more or less that the scope adds to that. Oh yeah, one important point is that it's important to understand that it wouldn't be practical, really, in many cases, to strive for the top, number 5, which will make more sense when we get into it, in every single category. For the highest level of maturity in all areas. The model is, I'll read here because it is difficult to read. The model is intended to provide a tool for benchmarking present levels of maturity to allow organizations to prioritize goals for higher levels of maturity aligned with business objectives as well as creating a strategy to achieve them. And then 7 disciplines, 5 levels per discipline, 26 categories. All right. So now we'll talk about what the different levels are. This might blow up a little bit. Almost there. That's a little easier to read. Go back up. All right. Initial or ad hoc. This is level 1. Really, an explanation of it is on the left, and on the right you have kind of, I don't know, maybe a summary or practical in the field examples of how you would determine what level you're at. So you have on level 1, no awareness of the importance of issues related to the activity, no documentation exists, no monitoring is performed, no activity improvement actions take place, no training is taking place on the activity. So you'll see mentions of no here. but this is probably about the only place you're going to see no. Because when this was developed, it was developed as a method to determine what you need to have, not definition by omission. Does that make sense? So it's, and we might have missed some of these points, but throughout the development of the whole thing, it was to really give an easy way to, if you meet these criteria, if you have this, if you check the boxes, then you meet it. It is achievement through inclusion, not omission. All right, so that's a common theme throughout the rest of it. You'll see these, like as I said, these are examples of what you might see in the real world in a real data center scenario, but it really is more prescriptive than this initial table lets on. All right, so continuing on, you have repeatable but intuitive, and then you have a defined process kind of in the middle. That's the middle of the road, at least in terms of this gradient. Effective personnel are trained in the means and goals of the activity. Documentation is present. No monitoring is performed of this particular thing. No activity improvements actions take place. Formal training has been developed for the activity. The distinction here is formal training, not just ad hoc or follow a guy around. It's more formal and documented training. All right, so for the difference there is managed and measurable. And then finally, number 5 is optimized. And then the formal training that I mentioned earlier, here's the explanation of it. It's defined as a set of activities that combines purpose-specific written materials with oral presentation, practical demonstration, or hands-on practice along with a written evaluation. So the reason, let's take a step back and discuss what we want to achieve as a group in reviewing this particular thing. The first thing I wanted to impart on everyone else was how comprehensive this actually is, or rather how detailed. One might argue things need to be added to make it comprehensive, but I think you'll agree once we get through the content that we get through that it is pretty detailed. And what I expect to happen, and I think this will be really helpful for the group going forward, is that I firmly believe that this will serve as a really good foundation and framework for additional contributions, not just to this, but just to the group in general. So I don't know if some of you were here, some of you weren't, for coal from vapor earlier falls into the realm of operations management, which is further down on the list. I don't remember which one it is, maybe 5? I think it's 5. And we expect to see more of those types of things. So identifying in this improvements to this potentially, but also using this as the basis for the group's charter, as well as, and once we kind of get through the review of this, which again, we're not going to look at the whole thing, but once we do get through it, we'll go back and look at the outline again, and I'd like to get everyone's input on ideas that you guys might have in either contributions that your particular organization may be able to make in that area, or ideas that you might have for a need for some type of contribution in a particular area. Okay. So the structure of this is you've got essentially the definition of the discipline. So EH&S facility programs focus on personnel, health and safety, and environmental regulatory compliance. And then you go down into it, and then the illness and injury prevention is first, with under that workplace safety program, and then you give context to each one, defining what it is we're talking about. You'll see down here the shaded, and this is found throughout the whole thing. Any area where it is regionally dependent, we call it out and show that particular region. So what we envision in the future is, as more and more locales become included in this, they can add on to this in what the applicable, what the applicable regulatory bodies are, the AHJ in this particular instance. for that, that level of detail. All right, so then we'll get down into the, we define the levels of maturity. So you define it here, and what the criteria are for those levels. And so actually, we'll probably skip ahead to go back real quick. Go to, what do you guys want to see? What category? Let's see, we've got, I'll go over them again. Environmental health and safety. And if you see any anything under that that you'd like to see, please let us know. So I want to go over something that's interesting to people, and generally speaking, environmental health and safety, as important as it is not considered all that interesting.
Site operations.
Operations, okay. Any other desire? We can bounce around, but all right. So that was. Sure. I'll go over them again. Yeah, I can't easily highlight it. Well, you know what I can do? Here's what I'll do. I will go back to this. Bear with me one moment. Easy way to. This. Okay. I'll use a slide from earlier. Okay. There you go. So you've got environmental health and safety, emergency preparedness and response. I need to say maintenance management, site management, operations management, change management, and quality. So we'll take a look at operations. Was there anything else that anybody would like to go over as well? Let's start there. Site management, okay. So the question is, have we considered the topic of energy management? Yes. We did not ignore it. It's kind of dispersed throughout. It isn't called out specifically. But again, understand that the energy management aspect of it is, I don't want to say secondary, but it's baked into the considerations. Again, you got to consider that we're talking about the quality of the way a facility is run, and energy efficiency is a part of that. But there are other pieces to this that, in some cases, would be conflicting. Well, let me go back and look at this. Search it.
Okay, you go to specs under review on WikiLeaks.
Yep.
There's the DC power, the data center operations security model, and then I pull up DC power with the spec on both of them.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Maybe I'm doing something wrong, but
No, that's probably my mistake. Let me fix that. Hold on a second.
I thought you were just messing with it.
No. I'm glad you saw. I did this on a break. I did it rather quickly, so that's probably not mine. I'm glad you said something. Sure enough. I'll fix it right now. Sorry about that. All right, so energy management reporting. It's actually under site management, under efficiency and optimization. So we'll look at that as well. But my point was that it is not considered a top level. Consider it fell underneath. Like I said, site management and site management. Pardon me? So yeah, when contributing this, it was contributed by them, but once it is, so understand this was only just contributed. The next step to this, and this is why it's in the section of under like community review period, is for people to give that type of feedback. I'm not saying I'm the authority on this, and as a matter of fact, I shouldn't be considered the authority. You should think of me as more of a facilitator for this type of thing. I mean, I'm not making the decisions. I have an opinion, but I'm just one contributor to the whole thing. And so, yeah, this type of thing, as we go through, as you take a look, I haven't had a chance to send out the request for review and comment and all of that, but that is one step in this whole thing. So when I do send that, and by the way, I'll send it through the mailing list link for please, here it is, here's a link, have a review, send the comments here, blah, blah, or to the group, and then we'll go through it. Edits will be made or may not be made. It goes to the IC, and eventually it eventually gets accepted up as, okay, here's the standard, here's the submission, the official submission, and then move on from there.
I'm pretty sure I track that actually captures the issues that are against it. You guys monitor so
is there a track that
any track
Back in P2E.
yeah. So you guys talk about how would you kind of characterize how this project how it is? I think it kind of
yeah, all right, well, let's, hold on a minute. I think it'll make,
sure.
right.
I mean, I think the ask here is to
Well, let me just show you.
kind of poke holes or ask questions.
Yep, yeah, well, there are a couple goals, right? It's to poke holes, ask questions, yes, but really is to get discussion going around this, right? So let me, again, zoom in. All right, so I'm jumping to energy management reporting, which is 13. And here we talk about the ability of energy management control systems to efficiently control energy use in the facility is a function of the data provided to the system by its components. Garbage in, garbage out. Calibration of sensors is a critical maintenance activity due to the fact that sensors out of calibration can lead to enormous energy expenses, which will go on to the next years. So we talk about calibration, the sensors there a little bit, but if we come down to the levels of maturity here, oh my gosh, sorry. There, okay, better? Okay. All right, so the different levels of maturity. And here we have called out specifically, right, level 2, basic information exists for energy data measurement. And by the way, another consideration to understand about this is the levels build on themselves. So we have in level 3, for instance, you would include this: basic information exists for energy management, measurement, analysis, decision support. Critical electrical load measures at the UPS level, PUE and DCIE are used. And then, we talk about hot aisle, cold aisle, and then proper sizing and for cooling or strategies are in place to align cooling capacity and demand. So then above that, you add to that granular understanding of electrical load. Facilities have an increased level of the critical infrastructure metered. And then follow, and right here, actually, this would be an example of where we probably want to call out the regional piece of this, which is ASHRAE recommendations. And then if we scroll down a little bit more, let's see. 4, you have the measurement of critical electrical loads together with environmental data. You have full air segregation, and let's see, crack and cray pumps at VFDs, and then oh my goodness, COP. And then we go to level 5, facilities infrastructure is completely metered. Generally speaking, when you see level 5, we'll be talking about metering and measurement and all of that. And go back to the definition in the beginning. I mean, that's essentially what that is talking about. You have an optimal floating humidity set point. You have normal operational mode is free cooling, economization, evaporative cooling, whether it's wet side or direct free air cooling, and we talked about the technologies there. So this is where we would go ahead. Sure. Yep. True. I see what you're saying. Well, goal is not to necessarily, at this point anyway, debate the fine points of this. I do get what you're saying, but if we were to talk about the free cooling aspect, you might consider this a stretch goal, right? The normal mode of operation being free cooling is potentially achievable anywhere. Maybe not necessarily in the desert or whatever, but it is an operational consideration to be made. Let's see. Yeah. Oh yeah, me too. Me too. As a matter of fact, in more data centers than not, it's not being used, from my perspective. Uh, yeah. So one point I will make about this particular category, though, is that this may be, of the whole thing, this may be a little bit of an anomaly, because the efficiency of it is the subject matter that we're talking about is you're really at the mercy of what the design is, right? That isn't the case for most of the rest of the model here, but, and maybe we can, you can certainly feel free to make your recommended changes, and I would take a look at it too. And anyway, just off the top of my head, one thing you may do, rather than saying normal operation mode is free cooling, might be, and I don't want to say if possible, because then you say, oh, it's not possible because we didn't design that way. But you want to give organizations credit, if you want to call it that, for having the capability and using it, rather than allowing someone to get to 5 when they don't have that capability. Does that make sense? That's a good question. Yeah. Yeah. And just like we said that no one should necessarily strive to achieve the highest level of maturity in every single one, it may not be possible because of whatever circumstances are present for the different data center owners to get there as well. It may not be possible. And that's it shouldn't reflect negatively on them, right? It's more of a, here's where we are. We don't have free cooling. If free cooling is important to you as a potential customer, then we don't meet your requirement. If it isn't, we can show that we have high level, we've got all these other things in the other categories or whatever, and you have an understanding back and forth, and you determine, is it a priority, is it not? And if it is, well, we don't meet it. Or whatever, we can put together a proposal for installing it in this particular area. I mean, there are a lot of different ways around it potentially, but this is just talking about, again, going back to what the priorities are of the business, aligning them to it, establishing the benchmark, and striving for improvement down the road. You mean for this category? That's not what I mean. I'll get to that in a second, but I'm talking about the process that you would go through as an organization is to go through this entire thing, right? You go through the whole thing. Where do I stack up in all the different categories, all the different disciplines, and come out of the other end? And you provide. We've done a self-assessment. You provide it to customers. They can spot check it. They can hire a third party to evaluate. There'll probably be some providers out there that will, for one of their services is to do this entire thing as an objective third party, and then provide that report as evidence for you to use when talking to customers. So the goal is not necessarily to come out the other end when all this is done and say our maturity level is 4.2. I imagine some people will probably do that, but the value is not in that. The value is establish your baseline as an organization, figure out where your priority is and where you want to go, and make a plan for getting there if there's any disparity, and then communicating that. So to get back to your question, though, and what would be, you said what would be a good level 4 for this one? So we're not talking about minimum efficiency levels to meet it. What we're talking about is the consideration. So if we look at 4, right, you're measuring the critical loads together with environmental data. You're taking all this stuff, and it is the facilities infrastructure is completely metered from an energy standpoint. This isn't prescribing that in order to get 4, you also have to be X% efficient or a PUE of whatever.
You just have to know what
You just have to know it. Right? You have to measure it, report it, and then the next point, right, is you have full air segregation in place. Hot aisle, cold aisle, chimney cabinets, all these different things. We do, well, it is specified that COP typically about 6 or greater, and then for those units, you have normal operations eco mode for at least, I would say at least 75% of the time. And then, so yeah, you have a couple points there, but it's, again, it's not, if you're below this level, you don't get it. That's not what this is suggesting. It's just considerations to make and policies to have in place. Did I? No, I'm not sure I sufficiently answered your question. You don't look satisfied. We have that. That's what I went over earlier. Yeah. Do you need me to go back to it? That's what this is all about. Yeah. I mean, there's no illusion that this is perfect and that this should be the final thing. It is. It's a stake in the ground. I think it's a rather large stake, but a stake in the ground nonetheless. And during the community involvement and feedback and all of that, that's the type of thing that we want discussion on. And I expect that, and I hope that there's a lot of discussion on this, whether it be here or through the mailing list and all of that. We can talk about all these points, and hopefully, through the discussion and the meetings that we have, and maybe we increase the frequency of the meetings, because right now we just have 1 a month. But if we're going through something as exhaustive as this, it may make sense to have it, once a week or once every 2 weeks or something like that. We're not beholden to any regimented schedule. We kind of control it ourselves as a group.
Again, I'm just going to ask the question, as someone who looked at this, right, say how much the level.
I would hope not. What you should do is look at this and in every single one of the categories say, okay, these are the criteria, this is where I think I need to be. And you shouldn't come out the other end necessarily with a final metric, but rather a collection of metrics for each level that is important to you as an organization. Does that answer your question? There may be some, we'll have to see how it comes about, but there may be some companies out there that say, we don't want to talk to anybody if they're under 3 in anything. That might happen. It might not be rational. We might have to look at it a little bit, but the goal of this was not to make another PUE, for instance, because it has its merits, but can also be gained. Of this model? Sure. So the goal of this, well, the goal of it being submitted, or what the overall theme of this is? Okay, sure. So the idea of this is to provide a framework with certain levels of gradients for any organization to establish priorities in each one of these categories, benchmark where they are, figure out where they want to be, and then develop a plan for achieving those goals. So in each one of these, you would, so for instance, you would figure out in this category, in the category of energy management reporting, which one is most applicable to our organization? Is it, are we sufficient with an ad hoc cooling layout design and cooling typically supplied based on required resilience? Or do we move up the scale? Where on here is important for us? And then you determine that. Okay, say we want to be, no, right. So more or less what you're asking is, what is the weighting, right?
That's graded levels.
Yeah.
There must be something that says, why should I not go? Why should I just stay? What is driving me?
Well, again, your business objectives. I mean, it kind of depends on what is a priority for your organization, whether it's demands from your customer, whether it is corporate initiatives internally. I mean, there are a lot of considerations to be made. It may not be feasible. And again, go back to the point I made earlier: is it wouldn't be reasonable for anyone to achieve level 5 in everything. Could it be doable? Yes. Will it make business sense? Probably not. For any type of organization. But the weighting comes back to how you as an organization, determine what's important to you. So we're not saying that any is more important than the other. We're also not saying that they're all equal. We fully acknowledge that this is going to be some things are going to be more important to, say, a financial provider versus a budget virtual private VPS provider. Right? The needs of those two organizations are vastly different. The customer bases are different. And it might even be regional too. You may have, in some developing countries, they don't care about some of this stuff. Either they're happy to have a data center at all, potentially. Yep. Well, I'm not sure I agree that it would be over and above. Problem being solved was the very foundation that I've already explained. It was so to give a little background on this. This was not developed in a weekend or overnight. This is actually over the course of many years of operation of many megawatts of data center. It started back when actually the inception of this whole thing. It's gone through a few iterations and edits and all that along the way. But it started back with LED technology, which was later acquired by Schneider Electric, and one of their biggest service offerings was data center management, and it was everywhere from small co-location or small enterprise all the way up through multi-megawatt companies, Fortune 10, and then everywhere in between. And so this was developed. It was day-to-day operations, but it was also there were services that were site audits, like operational audits, for looking at where organizations were, like how they were doing, where they could improve in their operations. And so over time, this evolved, but it was always proprietary. It was always them. So you had to, part of the pitch was to sell this as a good standard for benchmarking. And then once you got beyond that, then okay, do we want to do that audit for that? But the industry, the data center industry, has never really had a standard for evaluating how a data center is operating. Right? There's a lot of good information out there on design. Right? You've got tier standards, you've got TAN 942, you've got a bunch of other standards for design, and the way that a data center is designed is quite literally black and white. Anyone could look at the facility one lines or whatever and determine, here's a single point of failure. We need to take that into account when we're operating, or if it's during construction, we need to do something better to improve that or whatever. But the design is normally pretty clear cut. You can look at it and you can figure out fairly quickly, comparatively speaking, than you can if you're going in to evaluate a company that is going to provide you services. Like how good do they operate? Right? How do they operate? And there's a lot of consulting companies out there that'll do it, but they all have their own way of doing it, and there's no consensus within the industry of how it's done. That was the initial basis for this, was to provide that type of framework, the industry as a whole, to agree upon, or at least have a good basis for looking at that type of thing. So that's more or less what this is.
So if I was a customer saying, you as a data center developer, come to me and say, we're going to offer you a level 5 or level 4, I should go to this. But that implies that there's something else that's
Yeah, but this wouldn't be, there may be some elements of this that would be covered by the developers, by those constructing them, but this would be either, if you're self-operating your data center, it would be by your operations team, or if you're contracting to a third party to do third-party management of it, you would expect them to adhere to these levels throughout. So it's more of like an operational philosophy that whoever's running it is taking. I don't remember. Let me search. I do not recall.
safety engineer would cover it, translating that. If somebody talks to me and says, well, safety engineer doesn't cover that, so they know what that means.
Yeah.
And then there's not, that I'm aware of, there very well could be, not a document of it. They covered it as standard. These items covered. They can say they're regulatory compliance, but that probably be the regulation. I think the point of this is that so if they can, or it's not safety, that portion of it, they can point to this is stuff we have covered, kind of a quick and easy lead. It's a way to express what they're doing.
So I want to answer your questions, or at least try to anyway. So the second question was that about how you handle and report failures. Okay, so I just did a quick search for failure, and then so that brings up the continuous improvement of failure analysis, root cause analysis. So we talk about any incident involving injury or system downtime or had the likelihood of doing so should automatically require a formal failure analysis. Let's see. The parallax on this is terrible. Let's see. And I don't have it over there. Failure analysis should be provided to key stakeholders upon request. So more or less is talking about the reporting of it. So if we go down to if you see on the left, this is all the instances of failure. So I'll go up to these as well. But this is one point of that. I don't think this covers everything that you were just talking about, but it at least covers the basically figuring out what the heck happened, reporting that. And so you have, all the way from level 1, any failure analysis performed is usually done in-house at the request of management in an ad hoc, if it's requested manner. Then you go up the scale, it's processed to do it following an incident, and then move up from there. You have a well-documented failure analysis program and all of that. This doesn't talk about the frequency of it, but it's kind of the philosophy of reporting that type of failure. And remind me again what the first, this was the second. What was the first question? Oh, response times, that's right. Yeah, let me search for that as well. Don't remember. I agree that typically they would be included in that, but I think you might also agree with me that no SLA is, not that I've seen anyway, at least the data center operations piece is 87 pages long. So this, they are hard to measure, yeah, and they're vapid too. It's, well, we can give you this this SLA. Well, that doesn't work for me. Okay, well, if you pay a little bit more, we'll do this one. Did they change anything on the back end? No. It's just an insurance policy. Yeah, right, exactly. I mean, I'm oversimplifying, but yeah. All right, so let's look at response time. Search through here. So maybe I'll just search for response time. I'll check that too. All right, let's look at recovery. Well, there's disaster recovery. It's kind of weird. I'm sure the response. If nothing else, it is saying that there are yeah, I honestly I don't remember. I helped develop this, but it went through again so many iterations and it's so long and it's been a while since I've touched this. I don't remember everything. But if, for instance, response time is not in there, if I'm wrong, or at least some point of it, then again, it would be one thing that we want to bring up during the commenting phase, propose where it might go, develop criteria for them, the different levels and all of that. And so this is how we iterate, at least from my perspective. We're down 4:30. Okay, so this all started back when we wanted to check out operations management. True. 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 I would agree with that. Well, potentially yes. And the reason I say yes is we're not calling out necessarily that you need to respond within a certain amount of time. But what you might have in here is rather than saying responding within a certain amount of time, you have a procedure in place that explains what the reasonable response time is and the processes to follow for those types of events. So this is when you as an organization would say, okay, reasonable for us is 2 hours. Or, maybe it's not critical for us, it is 4 hours or 6 hours. Yes. Yes. I'm not sure I understand the question entirely. Let me raise it. Right. Do you mean, did we develop over time any average or average numbers, if you want to call it that, for each of these for the ones that we were involved in? Is that more or less what you're getting at?
I'm more saying, let's say, five disaster. That's really. I want to talk to whoever has done that.
Okay.
Really developing. Right, is there you guys develop level 5 here's
no. I can see significant value in that, but no, it was not done because all of these, the development of all of this and the use of all of this in the industry was really for a long time through internal operations within Schneider, as well as the site audits that they did too. And each of those were confidential. They did it for their own internal purposes. Most of the time, it was for because somebody knew that change needed to happen, but they didn't have any ammunition to show budget numbers to further up to justify making this change or dedicating this. And so it was more or less like they wanted to make the change. They didn't have the resources to make it, so bring this in as a third-party study. But what I will tell you is that they did, we did, I'm not at Schneider anymore, but while I was there, they did aggregate. And again, this was from many megawatts, many years, and you have to keep in mind that this is almost like gauging the health of the human population by going to a hospital, right? So it's only the people who took the steps to get these evaluations done. So take it for what it's worth. But on average, they were probably between 2 and 3. High 2s, low 3s. That's kind of where most people fell. Which, I mean, if I'm looking at it from an aggregated standpoint, that kind of makes sense. It's kind of 3 being middle of the road. That kind of indicates to us that as the developers of this, kind of validates the levels as they're defined to some extent.
It just strikes me that when you said that most verbiage and saying, yeah, it's kind of so-so. Nothing really that says that cut and dry these 5 companies that have programs. That this is how this company is getting to level 5 from this guy's getting to level 5 instead. How do I use liaisons? Yeah, back to how do I justify
Well, first of all, you may be very happy by saying, looking at this before it's built, because I don't think most people would look at it from that perspective. And so I think you're already ahead of most. But most of the time, at least from my experience, people were doing this because they had an outage, or they were trying to increase their customer base, so they wanted to make sure that they had internally their ducks in a row. Because if you make a mistake as a provider of any type of data center service, if you have an outage, that's a pretty big black mark on your reputation. So you want to make sure you have it.
Gathering the data,
Yeah.
organizing, okay, if I do this, this is what I will actually face, but you do it better, or work. And it is also possible. I guess I'm just not gathering the data that it's fair that I can provide this against, give the report of the, you should have to have them all over this. I know, but you're trying to give the customer instructions, you're trying to give the customer a tool to say, hey, level the playing, let me analyze all this flag up there.
But this is not about building. There are some construction elements to this,
Right.
but it's more about once it's built, how is it operating? Because
Yeah, because that told me this is what you do. Now, work on showing that and that, build it, spend money. How do you know? That's this question. How characterize how much. Okay.
well, hold on one moment. I want to address the comment. I'm trying to frame the scenario that you're describing. So you are talking about, so I am Mr. Owner, or soon to be owner, right? I don't have a data center right now. I want to have one, and I am essentially putting it out for bid to folks to build it and operate it. Okay, but this is where the important distinction is made, because this is primarily on the operational side. So if you're talking to a potential provider to operate your data center, a third-party provider, what you would want to know from them is what policies, what practices, or like all of the organization that they have in each of these different functions. And by the way, they're not going to be able to do them all, because they are a third party. Financial management, for instance, they can only get so far with their elements like that you as an owner would have to take care of as well. But the other side of the coin is that third-party data center providers, having been there myself, tell you that all of the customers that use those services are different. Like they have a higher priority in turnaround on an RCA versus weekly reports, just as an example. Maybe they're not the best examples, but I'm saying. So having the framework in place to meet what you as the owner are dictating to me are your priorities. And then if I can show you that here's my plan to get there, then, and I guess the root of your question is, so if I tell you that, okay, you tell me that A, B, C are my criteria, if you don't meet them, or in order for me to consider you as a provider to operate my data center, you have to be able to meet these kind of practices in place to hit all those minimum levels, right? And I tell you what you define, what you as the owner. Yes. Yeah. Absolutely, because this is for an organization to determine their own priorities and what's important to their business.
Just like data center tier. You don't always want a tier 5 or 4 data center.
And conversely, a flip side to that is maybe, right, as if I'm a third-party data center provider, I could tell you potentially I have the capability within our operational practices and all the policies and framework that we have in place that everywhere that we can meet a minimum of level 4 here or 5 here or whatever. I mean, there are some things that are going to, again, be determined by the way that the place is constructed. So, for instance, monitoring and instrumentation, an operational provider can't really do that. But were those points to be available, was that information to be available, then they could meet it. So that is, for them, the minimum. Owner determining what they need, or what they think they need, right? And then going from there. But your point of all of the level 4s will be different from company to company, I'm not sure I agree with that completely. There will be some, if you were to look at the details of it, of how they achieved it, yes, they will be different. But I guess one way to look at this is it doesn't really matter how you achieve it, the levels, it's just that you do. You meet the criteria for this, then as long as you can provide a basis for how you achieved it, you meet the criteria. Make sense? Listen, we need dissenting views. We need skepticism. And I really hope that that you will take the time to go through this during the review process, give comments and all that. Please do. I mean, I don't want my preference personally would not be, you know, acquiescence by everyone. Like, yep, okay, looks good to me. That I don't want that. This is going to be useful for the industry. It's going to need additional commenting and input and revisions and all of that. And that's what the whole data center group, or sorry, not data center group only, but open compute is about. Right, I cut you off earlier. How many? Yeah, I understand what you're asking. I don't know that we call that out necessarily, but from experience, what I can tell you is that a lot of those concerns will become pretty evident when you start looking at you know, trending and reporting and reports and all of that. So back when I was an analyst, I used to really enjoy data center tours. Bruce, you've heard this. But one of the things I'd like to do is when I went into a data center, I would ask to see their maintenance records. And pretty quickly, I could tell how well they operated their data center. If they were like worried or confused or like, yeah, you know, John has those, you know, those things on a shelf somewhere. We'll look for it and get back to you. Versus those who are like excited that you would even ask and anxious to show you what it is they have in terms of procedures or reports or whatever it is, right, related to operations. So I don't know that you necessarily need to call those things out specifically, but like I said, from experience, in other areas where we have reporting, and by the way, if I go back to, let's see. Pardon me? Yeah. Well, actually, if I go back to the beginning here, I go back to, let's see, okay, so if we look at 2 here, look on the right side of the bullets, right? No documentation exists, no monitoring is performed, no activity improvement actions take place, no formal training is being provided on the activity. Then you go to the next one for a defined process. So these are, again, the rough criteria for each of the levels. The affected personnel are trained in the means and goals of the activity, whatever activity is we're talking about. Documentation is present and can be found. No monitoring is performed. No activity improvement actions take place. Formal training has been developed for the activity. And then if you move on, you've got documentation present, monitoring is performed. Formal training on the activity is being routinely performed and tracked. And automated tools are employed in a limited and fragmented way. And then finally, you know, automated tools are employed in an integrated way to improve quality and effectiveness of the activity. So you see, we talk about the documentation, and you can kind of get a sense of the history and continuous improvement themes throughout this, and you see that throughout. Types of, yeah, well, I mean, it's all, well, I mean, it depends on which item we're talking about. So, I mean, any of them, right? If you just go down to these, it is documentation to support. Well, this is again that boring.
Section 2 is good.
Okay.
All right. Section 2, 3.1.
3.1. Repeats. Okay.
That's the document. I mean, someone was asking before. That's you've got a good procedure. You walk in, they've got a procedure for it,
Yeah.
and likely records of it occurring. Records of it occurring.
Yeah, that's good. So this is the procedure aspect of it. So this is specifically calling out documentation and procedures for what you would perform. But the difference between that and what I was talking about in the criteria further up was essentially describing evidence for the achievement of those. So you would so for this one, obviously the evidence would be that you have the procedures, but you might not in other areas. I'm trying to think of an example. Reporting, right? You would have processes for doing the reporting or whatever. But anyway, we'll go through this real quick. Understand here that, again, this is not prescribing what procedures to use, but it is a recommendation of some commonly occurring examples. So really, again, it's up to the owner and the operator to determine what are important for them. Do we want to have emergency procedures? And the purpose, again, of these procedures and processes are to anticipate, prevent, and mitigate the effects of incidents and emergency events. So here's some examples. If you don't know what they are, here's some. It doesn't have to be only them. It doesn't have to include all of them. But there are some. So the idea is that you have, as an organization, you have a plan in place where you're considering the emergency operating procedures. So if you go down to, the different levels here, you have few or no coordinated emergency procedures exist. You just basically, when something goes wrong, you rely on the knowledge of your staff and kind of take it as it comes and do your best, right? All the way up through, let's see, level 5 here, that your emergency procedures are vetted through incident critiques or some periodic review process, and then you have, again, they build in each other, so level 5 would include everything you have above that as well. So you have management involvement at level 4, where they monitor the use of EOPs, take actions as appropriate, and you have operations staff members responsible for doing these things when they happen and documenting them and including it in the training as well. And again, finally, the objective evidence that I think you were talking about was that the procedures are posted and are readily available in the area of use. Absolutely. I don't think I've heard anyone encapsulate it as well as you just did. Yeah, thank you. You're right. And also keep in mind that every previous attempt to this has been by someone trying to monetize it. Right? So they're trying to get the certifications. They're trying to get get clients to come in and look, you need to have a level. You don't necessarily have to have anyone come in. And this is both to help owners and operators that may feel like we could probably do a better job operating the data center, but where do we go next? So that's kind of what this is getting. Are there going to be those who look to get some type of official, stamp or whatever? Probably, but that's not the right. That's not the full goal of this necessarily. Other questions? It is. It is now. Oh. Well, it wouldn't have done you any good anyway, because I messed up the first link. But, yeah, it's fixed. Yeah. It is fixed, yeah. So that, I don't know if you were here when I mentioned it, but the next step to this whole thing is community feedback and evaluation. So more or less, more of what we were just talking about, asking questions, reading through it, making comments, proposing additions, changes, deletions, whatever, clarity. It may be a long process, it may not. I hope it is a evolved process. That's my hope. But that's the next step. So it is not a standard just yet. It's not accepted. It is contributed and submitted. And the next step is community. Community evaluation feedback. So what I typically do when submissions are made is I send out to the mailing list saying, hey, this has been submitted. It's during the comment phase. Please have a look. Contribute to just however you want to provide the feedback, whether it's a marked up version or whether it's discussion in the mailing list or whatever, just pushing that forward. And we'll probably bring it up on the meetings that we have. As I mentioned earlier, the meetings are monthly right now. Probably during this, we'll have to make them more often, more regular. But it doesn't have to be necessarily. And by the way, everyone doesn't have to be at every meeting, right? It's just progress is made regardless of who attends, right? We don't expect 100% of participation 100% of the time. It's just, when people can. It doesn't even have to be during the meeting. It could just be you look at it on your own time, make the comments, send it in, and whoever does join the meeting can bring those points up as, hey, you got this, talk about it, blah, blah, blah. Yes. Yeah, all that is on the wiki as well. Is the link to it. It uses Fuse, at least it does currently. They're talking about changing it to something else. But currently it is Fuse. Yes, sir. That's right. Yeah. And that's the point I was making. So I normally send this out to the mailing list, but I'm going to wait until after this conference to send that out because I want as many people on the mailing list as possible because we had the lapse of the data center design versus this one. So hopefully this will address all that. Yeah, yeah. There's no leader. I only facilitate. Yeah, right. Yeah, and I am looking for a co-chair. Put another way, some sanity. So if anyone has any interest in doing that, please let me know. All right, I think so. Probably what we'll do, if I go back to the agenda, I wanted to go over. Wait 1 second. Well, actually, yeah. So if you look at the wiki here, Bruce, meetings, project is held, and it's on the calendar too, by the way. Agenda we have there. Yeah, that's that. Right. Communication, et cetera, et cetera. If I go back to agenda here, didn't get disconnected. Good. So we've completed, I think, to the extent that we're going to, the review of the data center operations maturity model. The next things that I had here proposed, at least, but we don't necessarily need to stick to that, which is the developing the charter and the organizational framework revamp. And basically what I mean by that is using the maturity model as the basis for future contributions and organizing the group. But really that and the charter go hand in hand, at least in my opinion. And another point I want to make is that I don't mean to suggest in any way, shape, or form, I don't want to diminish the design side of things. Right? It's still a component of the data center group. It is, we still encourage submissions along the lines of, the DCE power, or I use that as an example because that was most recently a contributed one. But, the design piece of the data center group is still alive. It's still a component to it. But hopefully this will give us some direction in where there might be areas for additional contributions for the construction or hardware to do that. But I don't know about you guys, but I think my brain has about had enough today. We're a little early, but I don't know that in the next hour I'm going to be all that productive when it comes to developing a charter as a result of this. And then finally, so we did cover the additional submissions. That's what I was saying earlier when Cole was presenting. That's sort of out of order. But I'm kind of glad he did it because it kept everyone engaged while I had to go off and do my stage practice or whatever. And so really the only two things left, I suppose, are talking about the charter as well as any ideas for future contributions. So I think those 2 points are good things to hit tomorrow and Wednesday. And so I would encourage you to, in addition to reading through the submitted specs that we have under review, also think about, as you read through them, any ideas that you might have where your organization can contribute, or where it's like, what would be nice to have would be this. Just ideas. So unless anyone has any objections, are there any other questions? I think right? Any objections? We will adjourn for today.
That's the primary document. Everyone.
Yes. Okay. All right. Yeah. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I'm going to change it. Yeah, it's a PDF. Anyway, I have to work on that a little bit. But if you also look on there, it says October 2013. Yeah. So that it gives you a sense of how long this has kind of been in the works. But finally, it's good to go. All right. I didn't give my information. Silly of me. So it's pretty easy. Jason.Schaefer at it's not opencompute.org. It's ocproject.net. That's what it is. So we as project leads get the benefit of another email address. Jason.Schaefer at ocproject.net. Or you can get me on Twitter. I am MR Data Center. So Mr. Data Center, that's me. Those are the easiest ones to get me. Correct. Yeah. Yes. Should have spelled Schaefer. put that on the. Actually, it's on there. I'm pretty sure.
It is.
I am. No, I wish I was. No. I do have my own consulting company, but I work full time for a company based out of Boston by the name of MyCom Facility Services. But there's some overlap, but there's some that isn't. And, but anyway, my full-time position is at MyCom.
And what's the
Prompt and critical. Actually, it is. It comes from my time in the Navy as a nuclear reactor operator. So, if you're familiar with nuclear fission, there's supercritical, there's critical, there's subcritical. Those are the three states of the reactor. When it is supercritical, it means power is going up. When it is subcritical, it means power is going down. When it is critical, it means power is just staying. I don't know I would get into nuclear theory, but it is an interesting thing to talk about. So with uranium, the way that criticality is maintained is through continued fission, and the byproducts of fission are the fission products as well as free neutrons, and then you have alphas and you have gammas as well. But the thing that sustains fission is continued release of neutrons, which then react with the other molecules of fuel that are uranium-235, which after fission break into any number of different elements. But the neutrons that are released are called fast neutrons. And what happens is they interact with everything that's around it, the other molecules of fuel, but primarily the moderator. And the moderator is whatever medium is flowing through there. Typically within a boiling water reactor is water, pressurized water reactor is water. And through the interaction with that water, they slow down and they become thermal neutrons. It is very difficult for a uranium-235 molecule to absorb a fast neutron just because it has so much energy and it passes by so quickly. But there are some that do go on to produce more reactions. So there's fast neutrons and there's thermal neutrons. If you achieve a point where the continued criticality of a reactor can be sustained by fast neutrons alone, this is called prompt critical. This is a very bad thing.
I was going to say, did I ask this question?
You did. It's a bad thing, but most people don't know that. It actually sounds pretty cool, I think. Prompt critical, right? That's what it is. It's because my background is in as a reactor operator. Many years ago, it was my foundation for mission critical, because it doesn't really get any more mission critical than a 95,000-ton warship in the middle of the Arabian Gulf. And so it's kind of a throwback to that. And because we talk about mission critical in this world, and then it was prompt critical. Anyway, that's what I chose for my company.
All right. Label nuclear symbols on Mr. Data Center.
Yep, that's where it comes from. Well, that actually happened from prompt criticality. Yeah. Everyone, all of my, so there are a lot of Navy nukes in the data center world, and those who know, like who've been former Navy nukes, like, prompt critical, why the hell would you name a company that? Because you're the only one who knows it, right? Everyone else out there is like, it's just two words. And then, plus, it's a good conversation. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for involving involvement, and please continue to do so. Sign up for the mailing list.
Again, if you haven't already,